Hi again. In Dwight Wilson's book, Armageddon Now, he has been discussing the 1920s and the reaction among evangelicals to the Balfour Declaration and whether the Zionist movement, leading thousands and tens of thousands of Jews back to Palestine, would lead directly to Armageddon. He takes up that subject again here. Although premillenarians staunchly supported the restoration of Israel, they continued at the same time to be infected by the endemic anti-Semitism in American society. They continued to accept the phenomenon of anti-Semitism itself as prophetic, either due generally to the Jews' sins against God or due particularly to their rejection of Jesus as the Messiah. Another aspect of the anti-Semitism of the premillenarians, the identification of Jews with radical movements, was reinforced by the controversy in the early 1920s over the legitimacy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Protocols was a forgery which purported to be a record of a Jewish conspiracy to rule the world. It included declarations such as the following, quote, "By the severity of our doctrines we shall triumph and shall enslave all governments under our super-government. Do not think that our assertions are without foundation. Note the successes of Darwinism, Marxism, and Nietzscheism, engineered by us. The demoralizing effects of these doctrines upon the minds of the Gentiles should already be obvious to us. We will present ourselves in the guise of saviors of the workers from oppression when we suggest that they enter our army of socialists, anarchists, communists, to whom we always extend our hand under the guise of the rule of the brotherhood demanded by the human solidarity of our social masonry." End of quote from Protocols of the Elders of Zion. To which Wilson says, in America, the Protocols appeared in various papers in Boston and New York, but was given its widest circulation in a series of articles in Henry Ford's paper, the Dearborn Independent, and then issued collectively as the International Jew. Writing in the Evangel magazine, one of the better-known premillenarians, D.M. Panton, assumed the Protocols to be legitimate. The article, The International Jew, by Charles C. Cook in the King's Business magazine, was a response of multiple prejudices. At first, he blamed the Catholics. And here's a direct quote from the King's Business, Charles C. Cook. "It is possible that it is all a clever piece of Roman Catholic propaganda, prompted by jealousy of the Jew for securing settlement in Palestine, with possible possession of its shrines and holy places, and also a skillful move on the part of Rome to divert attention from its own ambitious plans to seize the world. We know that whatever the Jews are proposing in this respect, Rome has far outspread them, for it has long been highly organized and functioning, and that its avowed purpose is to sit upon the throne of temporal power and give reality to the purport of the Triple Crown." End of quote. Cook was not sure that the Protocols was merely forged propaganda, however. He said further, "If they are forgeries, then they are among the cleverest specimens of deception ever devised, for even allowing the latest possible date of their production, there have been historical occurrences since that coincide exactly with the plan laid down in these documents and the predictions contained therein." End of quote. But given either verdict, Cook was led to add the following reflections. Again, straight from Cook. "The Jewish race is morally fully capable of doing all that is charged against it. It is at present rejected of God and in a state of disobedience and rebellion. As a race, Jews are gifted far beyond all other peoples, and even in their ruin, with the curse of God upon them, are in the front rank of achievement. But accompanying traits are pride, overbearing arrogance, inordinate love for material things, trickery, rudeness, and an egotism that taxes the superlatives of any language. Oppressed are they, indeed, and subject to injustice more than any other race, and yet never learning the lesson of true humility. These cheap adulations, that is, of editors, ministers, and politicians, are usually based on no better foundations than self-interest, for the unregenerate Jew usually has a very unattractive personality. There is a reason for his being persona non grata at resorts and in the best society. Who can deny it? Well, of course, the sentiments that were expressed openly here by Cook are not acceptable in polite society today. However, anti-Semitism and this support for Zionist Israel are found side by side to this very day in some evangelical circles, not others. Then Wilson concludes this section, such a catalogue of anti-Semitic attitudes was not the general rule, but the editorial policy that permitted it can neither be excused nor reported without revulsion. The same journal earlier had explained the wave of anti-Semitism as a sign of the times, saying that Scripture showed that a gathering of the Jews to Jerusalem must take place in a compulsory way, that God's wrath upon them will cause them to emigrate from the various countries to Jerusalem. At another time, another explanation, the self-malediction, his blood be upon us and on our children, from Matthew 27, verse 25, has loosened unceasing judgment on the Jew down all the gospel ages. And still another view, this one citing the evangelical witness, quote, the Christian is not swayed by these cross-currents of racial animosity, but from his guidebook he sees that in the final woes of this age, judgment not only falls upon the Christ-rejecting Gentile nations, but in the convulsion of the peoples, the Jew is made to drink a final draught from the cup of bitterness, when 2/3 of the nation will be wiped out in the time of Jacob's trouble. He's basing that on Zechariah 13, by the way. This chastisement of the Jew is the result of his own sins and national selfishness, as surely as the final judgment of the Gentiles is well merited by their godless career. So here the wrath is at least shared around. Wilson says later, an even more curious situation, in view of the fact that Russia was predestined to invade Palestine and try to recover it from the Jews, was explained. Quote, there are 24 Jews today trying to control Russia. This is, of course, in the early 20s. And out of that has come the miserable mess that presents itself to the world. Why? Because no people, no individual, and no nation can reject Christ and lay the foundations of a permanent government. It cannot be done. End of quote. Thus the Premillenarians justified the injustice to the Jews as ordained by the just judgment of God. Either they asked for it, or they had it coming, or it was for their own good. Not one stopped to consider Jesus' prayer on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I'll put in a link to our videos on the anticipations of Barber and Russell in respect to 1914, what that would mean for the Jew. In the 1870s, they had published a book together, actually written by Barber, but it seems financed by Russell, and that book was called Three Worlds. So we have a playlist where they take up all of these signs of the end and express their joint faith, at least in 1877, that when 1914 came, God's favor would return to Israel. See you soon.